Chapter 7, Sticky Notes. This is page 162. Okay, so the case study here is about fracking, and you may have heard a lot about fracking in the news. And so we will come back to fracking again in chapter 19, but this central case study is a really good explanation of fracking, so we're going to learn it here as well, and you'll be tested on it here also. We have fracking going on in different states. The case study happens to be about the Marcellus Shale Formation here in Pennsylvania and Ohio, but again, it's in a lot of states. It's in Oklahoma and Colorado and all over the Midwest, and even in California we have some fracking as well. Not as much, but some. Okay, so the technical name is hydraulic fracturing, and this particular case study is for natural gas, but in California we also can do it for petroleum oil. Natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel, and so a lot of places try to use natural gas more to minimize their emissions of greenhouse gases and air pollution. So the positives of fracking is that if we have more supply of natural gas, the cost goes down, so it makes it cheaper. We can reduce coal use by using natural gas for our power plants instead of coal, and that's great because coal is really terrible for the environment. Natural gas is better than coal, and so reducing coal use is better. We employ a lot of people by fracking, and then money for landowners. So if you are a farmer in Kansas and you have a piece of land where there's natural gas, you could get tens of thousands of dollars from the natural gas companies to come in, and for a lot of poor farmers this is a lot of money. Here are the negatives and why we are concerned in the about the environment and about people's health from fracking. So when fracking went in, it was exempted from NEPA, which is a law that says that you have to do an environmental impact statement before you're allowed to drill on public land. It's also exempted from the Safe Drinking Water Act. So when we allowed fracking initially, back about 10 years ago or 12 years ago, it was written that it was exempted from those laws. Companies use different chemicals, and we don't know what those chemicals are because they don't have to tell us what they are. And so you might be a farmer that got paid to frack on your land, but then your well water gets contaminated with natural gas, and you can light it, actually your well water on fire, or chemicals that can cause cancer and kill you. In some places, some places have had radioactive wastewater, so pools of radioactive wastewater. That's not great for the people living around them. They have found now that there has been a dramatic increase in earthquakes in places that never had earthquakes before, like Oklahoma has a lot of earthquakes now. They never did before, and so the scientists are saying it's from fracking, and the fracking companies are saying, no, it's not. And then by law, the companies don't have to disclose the chemicals that are used, so we're not even sure what to check for in well water, see if those chemicals are present if we don't even know what they are. So that's a problem for people's health. So this figure and caption is really good to explain how fracking is done. So again, read through and memorize the caption and understand all of the different parts of how fracking is used. All right, going on to page 165. Here's Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons. So we talked about this with an activity in chapter 1, but let's go through the sticky notes because this is where it is in your book. So basically, Garrett Hardin wrote an essay, and he said that unregulated use of a resource leads to its depletion. And so some examples of commons are rangeland, which is really what the essay was about, oceans for food, air, and water in terms of pollution or water use, like with a drought, forests for lumber. Forests also provide clean air, water, and recreation. So what are our solutions to prevent tragedy of the commons? Laws, quotas, and limits are all solutions. People won't regulate themselves, so you have to set up laws and regulations. Okay, turn all the way to page 173. On 173, we talk about the first wave of environmental policy from the 1860s to 1900. And really, environmental policy does not necessarily mean protecting the environment. This particular wave of environmental policy was not about protecting the environment. It was about conquering nature, westward expansion. There were some laws passed during this time. The Homestead Act really settled the prairie, and that biome is almost completely gone due to the Homestead Act. The Mineral Lands Act basically gave free mining on public land to anybody who wanted to do it, and they did not have to pay for environmental cleanup. This law is actually still in effect. It was never taken off the books. And then basically the Timber Culture Act said cut down the forests. And really, we had no idea that we could destroy nature at this time. That we thought it was so infinite that we really wanted to expand our economic power and our power in the world as United States. And we did, but we also did a lot of damage to the environment, but we really had no idea that we could do that much damage just because it just seems so vast. Okay, so the second wave of environmental policy, first up here, Rachel Carson and Silent Spring, the book that she wrote about DDT. So the second wave of environmental policy aimed to mitigate the problems of the first. Mitigate is to fix. So this is when people started preserving land. They're like, oh, the forests are almost gone in the prairie. That's gone. And so what's left? Let's preserve what's left. And so that's what they started doing in the early 1900s. And that was a really great movement. Then the third wave is our modern wave. And this is really where a lot of laws to address pollution came into effect, like the Clean Water Act, the Clean Air Act, also the Endangered Species Act. We banned things like DDT, which Rachel Carson wrote about. Okay, on this page right here, know about the Cuyahoga River. Basically, this is a river in Ohio that caught fire several times and really brought to light that industry should not be dumping chemicals into bodies of water anymore because they catch on fire and it's really not good. So it really addressed the issues and it brought it to the forefront, and it gave the Congress the impetus to pass laws to help protect the environment. Okay, so a couple that they passed at this time, or one of them that they passed was NEPA, which is the National Environmental Policy Act. That was part of our case study. And basically it said that if you are going to use public funds or public land, you have to prepare an environmental impact statement. And then you also need to know what the EPA is. Now, the EPA is an agency, not a law. So this one's a law, that one's an agency. Don't mix them up. So that's the Environmental Protection Agency, and its role is to enforce the laws that Congress passes. So Congress has to pass environmental laws, and the EPA has to enforce them. The EPA cannot enforce things that Congress does not say it can enforce. So EPA cannot make laws, it can only enforce the laws that Congress passes. And then here's a bunch of other really important laws that were passed during this time. You will have to memorize all of them at some point and what their provisions are. Provisions are, what does the law say? But we will study these laws in the appropriate chapter, and so you'll study them as part of the chapter that they go with. All right, on page 126, you do need to know all the laws on this page for your next exam. Some of them we will review again in the appropriate chapter, but go ahead and make sure that you memorize these certain laws on this page, and then we'll memorize some more later. So do you have to know the years? No. But do you have to know what they say? Yeah. So basically just know what the law says for all of these particular laws. Going on to page 181. Know the definition of subsidy. So basically it's money from the government either through a tax break, a tax credit, or some sort of resource for free, like a road. It makes products artificially cheap because taxes pay for part of the product. So examples are gasoline. We subsidize oil. Without that subsidy, actually gas would be more expensive. Seems weird, but it's true. We subsidize corn, wheat, and soy, so actually products made with corn syrup are cheaper than they should be. So sodas are cheaper than they should be, than the real cost of what it takes to make that product. It's part of the reason why a lot of people think we have a high obesity rate is that the unhealthy things are cheaper than the healthier things because the unhealthy things are subsidized. Coal roads for logging. So basically these roads that are built through the national forests are called fire roads for firefighting, but really the loggers use them for free. So one example of a good subsidy that is good for the environment are things like solar panels, which we call photovoltaic cells in this class. In California, if you put them on your house, you get a nice rebate on your taxes. So there can also be good subsidies as well for the environment. But a lot of these are actually really bad for the environment. This last one is a good one. Let's talk about cap and trade on page 183. Cap and trade is known as marketable emissions permits, but everyone calls them cap and trade. So basically this is a way for companies to reduce their pollution. We set a law that says in the Clean Air Act, you can only emit 2 tons of pollution an hour from your coal power plant. Or let's say here 10 units of pollution, but this company only uses 5, then it can sell or trade those other allotments of what it can pollute, but it doesn't, to another company whose plant is dirtier. So let's say another company also is given 10 units that they're allowed to pollute, but they are more than 10, so they can buy the other 5 and they can actually pollute 15. So it's a way to reduce air pollution, water pollution, and also greenhouse gases. They're being used in California for greenhouse gases. That's it for chapter 7.